This is Gene DeLisio with a featured sports interview from WDLB and WOSQ. Lori Flanagan was a standout softball player in Marshfield in the years prior to girls athletics at Marshfield High School. She began playing in amateur leagues in central Wisconsin in the early 1970s, eventually graduated from UW-La Crosse and Mankato State. Lori then began her career in athletic administration at Mankato and St. Cloud State and spent 14 years at St. Louis University before she joined the staff at the University of Missouri St. Louis, where she was named athletic director in 2009. Lori was inducted into the Marshfield Area Baseball and Softball Hall of Fame in 2012.
Thanks, Gene. First of all, it's been great to come home. When I played back starting in 1975, and then I actually left the state in 92, we just played. That was my opportunity to be in an organized competition for girls/women, and never thought a lot about the league that we played other than we were pretty good. And knew that the Softball Association was still, an organization that promoted softball, men's and women's here in Marshfield, but didn't know a lot about the Hall of Fame. I'm honored, and I'm very humbled by that, to be put in with some of the women that really came before me to really make my opportunity happen.
Of course, you played in an era when there was not a lot of opportunity for young women to play in athletics and very little on the high school level. So how did you get to softball? There was no high school softball back then. So how did you get to the point where you could play on these some of these competitive teams?
I just graduated from high school, Gene, and just knew that there was a women's league out there, and played on like a Monday night or a Thursday night. And a person that I had graduated with, she had an older sister that was trying to get players to come out and play, and so she asked if I could come and play on. My first team was the Der Spielhaus. So I had to get permission from my mom and dad, and obviously I was only 17 at the time I graduated from high school, so going into a bar was not what they thought was the best of interest for me, but went and played on this league, and then that's the first time I ever watched the MAC tournament, and our team was in it, and we had a lot of success, and I think I was seen by some other people then, and at the time Gary Gunn then, who was managing the Downtowner, came and asked if I wanted to play for them. And again, it was when Linda Fensky and Jan Rasmussen and Mary Rogers, those are the big names in women's softball in the area. So I was flattered to be able to play with them, and never changed. Stayed with that team the next 12 years. So took advantage of a great opportunity, but didn't realize it would ever end up into something like this.
That had to be quite a step for a young lady who had not had much athletics behind her, since there was no high school athletics, to walk into some really outstanding softball teams like the Spielhaus and some other teams you played. What was that adjustment like to all of a sudden go from virtually nothing athletically to some really high caliber softball?
Well, I had three brothers growing up, so we did play a lot outside because we lived in the country and with some of our other neighbors. So I played a lot of baseball, played in the country with my neighbors. Not the level that was the way Mary and Linda and Jan were. They took me under their wing, threw me out in left field, and I could catch a ball, Gene, and I could run somewhat fast. My hitting was never the best, never has been. But they felt that I had that talent, and I just held my own, practiced a lot, did a lot of practicing, and then just learned from the best. And that's where, like I said, I was just flattered that they would want me. And Mary Rogers and I probably became very close friends, that wherever we went, Mary would always drive or make sure I was taken care of. And after that first year, then it was just natural that I was on that team. And again, we always had really good players to play with us when we represented the Downtowner, that I just worked my way into then, starting the pitcher rotation, because our pitcher had retired. And I told Gene Muschel, because he switched to become our manager, I just told him that I think I can pitch. And I practiced and practiced and practiced, and went out on the mound, and I guess did an okay job because he left me out there.
You had some really outstanding teams back in that era. What was it like to play on teams that were that good?
I shouldn't say you knew you were good, but you had this feeling, you had this, I guess, this confidence in you that you were that good. And if one person was playing poorly, another person would pick you up. It's kind of hard to describe, just that when you walked into a ball field or when you walked into a tournament, you knew that you were the team to beat. You, like I said, you just had a level of confidence that I think with everybody around you, we didn't have egos, Gene. We did not. We played with a lot of class. We played with a lot of dignity and pride, and I think that was a lot of it is pride. We really felt we were representing the downtowner and Bobby Holobitz and his whole organization, and we also had really good managers in Gene Mushel and Gary Gunn. I mean, they would do anything for you and let us travel wherever we wanted to travel. So again, it was just a lot of young women or old middle-aged women that just had a common goal, and that was just to play the game the best we could play it.
What made your team so good?
I think the leadership of Linda Fensky and Mary Rogers and Jan Rasmussen. I think those three really, they wanted to play because they didn't have opportunities either. They were older than I was. So this was their shot, their opportunity to play an organized competition for girls, and they wanted to do it very well. And so the rest of us just followed suit.
What was it? How did that team stay together so long? You're talking 10 or 12 years where this team really was a real dominant powerhouse. What was the key to keeping them together as long as they were?
Just a level of commitment. We all had a certain position on the field also that you didn't have to worry about losing your position. I was the pitcher, Mary was a shortstop, Linda was a short fielder, Jan Rasmussen, as long as she could play her knees, she was the catcher. We had Pam Hazley, actually, who got inducted tonight. She played for us for a little bit. Gene was always watching good players in the area, but that nucleus of really 6 to 7 players, every summer we had made a commitment. We were going to play as long as we could physically play. And we'd start Memorial Weekend and we'd finish Labor Day weekend and we'd pack up our gloves and say, see you in a year. And that's exactly what we did. No questions about it. That was a level of commitment we made.
It was a great ball club that you had back then. What was the acceptance level amongst the fans like? It sounds like there was a great deal of interest in this ball club.
There was, and if you would have watched, like I said, Mary and Linda, they just demanded a lot of respect from the men's players because the men's softball in St. Louis or in Marshfield was so good that the male players watched the women's teams and vice versa, and I think a lot of the men's players really respected our ability. Well, again, it was something to do. We'd go down the fairgrounds. The fairgrounds would be just swarming with people that would just ride their bikes or walk over that night or drive in. And again, the leagues that we had, the women's league especially, just had a lot of people get involved, and they enjoyed watching good softball.
You were talking, it sounds like playing a lot of tournaments, doing a lot of traveling during the course of the summer. But what about the level of play in this immediate area in central Wisconsin when you were playing in a league or something like that? What was the level of competition like around here?
Well, it's, they talk so much tonight about Roselville. Roselville used to have a tremendous women's tournament out there. And then, like I said, the Marshfield area, the MAC tournament started, and you were bringing in 64 teams. 64 teams from all over the state or the region. We used to play against a team out of Stevens Point all the time called Johnny Nalane's. And then even here in town, Power Pack led by Bev Trinkler. The reputation of some of those teams just created such a draw that other people wanted to play against them. And I think, again, all these local areas, whether they talk about Durand, but we would go to Wisconsin Rapids or Stevens Point, or we would go to Junction City. I mean, anywhere that there was a softball league, we would go and try and get in a tournament. The local people would come and watch and genuinely had maybe that was their form of entertainment, but they really came out and watched softball. much different than today.
Well, what is it like today? I'm not sure how much you follow women's softball on the amateur level anymore, but what are the differences you see between the game today and what it was back in your era?
Well, I work at a major university now, so we have, collegiate women's softball, and it's primarily fast pitch. So that's probably the biggest thing is fast pitch for girls has taken over, and I think it's a very refined skill. These girls are working on whether it's pitching or hitting or fielding. I mean, they're very, what do I want to call it? I don't want to say refined, but they're very specific on their skills that they work on. And some of these girls go to pitching camps and hitting camps, and they're working for those scholarships. That's the difference that I see now. Is softball used to be the only vehicle that we had. I think fast pitch has taken over that vehicle as the primary vehicle for girls, and whether it's the high school or in the college level. And it's definitely a sport now that is, even when you watch the College World Series, it was just on TV last week, and the number of people that are there, it's a it's a fun game to watch. It's a very fast game to watch, very highly skilled game. Different than us. We played slow pitch, and, people were drinking beer in the dugout between innings, and it was a little bit more casual than it is today.
You mentioned your work with Missouri St. Louis. I'd like to ask you about that, some of your duties there and how you find that job over at Missouri St. Louis.
Well, I'm the director of athletics, so I oversee 11 sports. We're in a Division II conference. We're in the toughest Division II conference in the country. So with that comes, just like any Division I, we're that high end of a Division II. We're considered a low-level Division I, and with that comes scholarships, it comes with recruitment, it comes with everything that you see in college athletics, the good and the bad. There are days that people get along, and then there are days that teams do well, and then there's other days when we struggle just because a team isn't doing that well, or students not happy with something. But at the end of the day, we always talk about student athletes, and our goal is to help. And this is a vehicle for students to get a scholarship to go to school as an athlete, but our primary goal is to graduate them with a degree.
Lori, one thing we don't have in Wisconsin, aside with one exception, is Division II athletics. We have Division III, we have Division I, we have a couple of NAIA schools, but not much Division II except for Parkside. Mm-hmm. Tell us about what that level is like for people who really are not familiar with the Division II world.
Division II is more of we talk about a balance. The student athlete is a little bit more balanced. Balance in the life is our motto. And what we try and do is get our students to not only participate in athletics as a way to live the dream. They're maybe not going to be as strong of a Division I, or they may not have professional aspirations, especially for women, but it's a level of competition that's far above the high school level, and kids are working now, and because we offer full scholarships, we're very similar to Division I, but we also realize that a lot of Division II students are going to have to work to go to school. And that's more of the balance in the life, is that students, we're going to teach them how to be, to manage their time. We're going to teach them how to, play with grace. It's, again, because they don't have a lot of life after Division II. So you're going to do everything you can to be the best athlete you can at Division II level, but when it's done, it's done. So they use that as a way to, and again, that's very different than Division I. We have elite athletes, but it's a Division II level. Division III is non-scholarship. So again, you can have some great Division III programs. I mean, here in the state of Wisconsin, when you look at the Wisconsin system with lacrosse and Eau Claire and the Oshkosh and I want to say the Stouts. I mean, they have some great athletic programs. Those kids are just not on scholarship.
I do want to ask you also, before I let you go, your experience playing basketball at Marshfield High School, because that was one area where you could play some high school sports, and you were involved in that first team. Tell us about that experience.
Oh, it was fun. It was kind of a dream come true, Gene, because, again, growing up with three brothers, we played basketball all the time outside, and I didn't know why girls couldn't play high school basketball. So we got a team together. Back in 74, 75 was the first year that the girls basketball started, and we got a group of, I don't know, there's maybe 12 players on that team. I remember our very first game, Gene, we were over at Wausau West, and we were so tired, and one girl had a necklace on and she dropped it in the lane, and she stopped the game, and we were looking for this necklace, and I said, why? I said, here it is, and she said, no, leave it there for a while, we've got to catch our breath. So we just continued to look for that necklace. Very, very different than today. But we just, again, we did it for the pure fun and the opportunity that, again, I work in college athletics, so I believe that everybody should be given an opportunity, but primarily for girls and young women. That was a great time for us in 74, and we may not have understood the game the way it is played today, but we gave it our best, and I'll always remember that, because the second game of the season I broke my wrist, so I wasn't able to play again, and I really had to learn a lot of patience then, because the cast had to stay on for exactly 4 months, so my career was very, very short. But it was, again, you're representing your school, you're representing yourself, you're finding teammates, and you're just playing a game that you like.
And what a contrast that must be for a person like yourself, who now is an athletic administrator, to oversee women's college sports and look back at 1974 and think of where it all started. It's come such a long way, hasn't it?
Yeah, it really has. And, I look at all the pioneers of the women that really worked for us to get to where we are today. And I guess because of my age now, I'm becoming one of those pioneers. Unfortunately, it's, you continue to work all the time. But it's just, I look at athletics as a vehicle to just give kids an opportunity to do something that they're good at, that they may, and it gives them a tremendous amount of confidence and pride and respect. That's why there's so many people that really enjoy watching. They live that dream through the eyes of someone else.
Former Marshfield area sports standout Lori Flanagan inducted into the Marshfield Area Baseball and Softball Hall of Fame in 2012. This is Gene DeLisio for WDLB and WOSQ Sports.